Thank you, Al. I've learned never to oversell because then you have the risk of under-delivery. So ignore everything that he said. It's Cape Town. So we have a great panel here today as they're finding their seats. I'll note them, but they'll introduce themselves when they're ready. Okay, panelists, starting with Michel. Starting with Michel. Introduce yourselves to the audience. Say hello.
Okay, I think we're ready. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Michel Buffat. I'm the acting head of aviation and yacht finance at Credit Suisse. We have been in this business for a little bit more than 20 years, myself about 15 years. And we finance business jets of wealthy individuals. We're active globally, except for clients domiciled in the US because of some regulatory limitations.
So, good morning. My name is Marie-Laure Gassier. I'm also a banker working for BNP Paribas. So I've built and grown the business jet franchise for the bank over the last 10 years approximately. We are now based in Geneva within wealth management, and we are also offering jet and yacht financing to wealthy individuals all over the world except in the US.
Good morning, everybody. Johan Blitz. I'm heading the corporate aircraft financing department for UBS. We provide aircraft financings for ultra-high net worth clients of the bank on a global basis. And we have a quite nice amount of planes in our portfolio.
Good morning, Sabrina Glimcher from Global Jet Capital, and I'm really sorry about my voice. We are a private jet aircraft lessor and financier with a global footprint and based in Connecticut.
Morning, everyone. I'm Marc from Investec. We're a specialist bank and asset manager. I focus solely on aviation and covering the entire African continent from a business aviation perspective as well as on the commercial side. Based in South Africa, I think the running joke on the panel is that I'm from Johannesburg, not. But yeah, through our team.
So you actually know where Cape Town is then?
Yeah, hopefully. But with our colleagues in the UK and Channel Islands, we cover the globe.
Good morning. I'm Lewin. I'm the founder of my law firm. I'm based here in London. I represent sellers, buyers, borrowers, and lessees of aircraft, and I have an external general counsel practice.
I'm Clay Healey. I own AIC Title Service. I have been told by the International Registry last year that we are their largest client on an annual basis.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so the agenda for our discussion today: what is Cape Town? What are the practical implications? What have been the biggest wins? How much faith the financiers put in the treaty? Have the original intentions been met? And then, if we have enough time, evolving Cape Town matters. So, there was a Slido question, Al, I believe. There we go. Right, so you see the very clever questions that my friend Eric generated. Right, so what is the Cape Town Convention? Who here in the audience is aware of the Cape Town Convention and aircraft protocol? Right, so all right, there's enough hands. That's good. Okay, so Eric's going to cover the basics of the Cape Town Convention and treaty.
So the Cape Town Convention defines ownership, security, and other property interests in airframes, engines, and helicopters. It also sets out for contracting states a choose-your-own-adventure of declarations that impact the effect of those registrations. The Cape Town Convention is a multilateral treaty that is based on U.S. commercial law. There are 79 contracting states, and it's effective in the vast majority of them.
So here's your visual. Blue countries represent what, Eric?
That's where it's effective, and the yellow countries are countries that have signed up to it, but where it's not yet effective.
Right, and the yellow are just signatory, which means that it's on the horizon, but you can't rely on that, on the treaty to override state law.
Well, that's right. I mean, if it's not ratified or effective, it's got no effect.
So what Eric's saying is there's stages here, right? So the nation will sign up to the treaty. There are alternative provisions that are called declarations. They'll sign up to the opt-in or opt-out of them. But the treaty applies to all sorts of classes of mobile assets, not just aircraft. It applies to aircraft because we have an aircraft protocol. So it's the two together. It's the two together, right, that equal the CTC that we'll keep referencing.
So I ended up doing this a little bit out of order, but basically these interests are ownership, security, and other property interests like leasehold interests in airframes, engines, and helicopters. And then, yeah, you've got these declarations, and the contracting states can mix and match as they want to. The OECD has lent external support to what it views as the creditor-friendly declarations. And then if you choose those as a contracting state, your parties within who do export credit agency-backed financings get a pricing discount on the minimum premium rates.
Very good. Remembering those of you who know something about Cape Town, that this is really driven by the export credit agencies for the most part, Boeing and GE. They were big proponents of having some set of international laws that approximated a body of law that they were familiar with, U.S. law, so the UCC and Chapter 11, Section 1110 especially. And it became fairly well regarded by all the ECAs, and so they also promoted it within their countries. And so it was to facilitate the export, pretty much, of aircraft assets. Clay will talk more about how it came to be imposed on our part of the industry when he gets a chance to speak. All right, so Eric, other aspects that you want to mention before we move on?
Yeah, no, so the Cape Town Convention authorized the International Registry, which is based in Dublin, Ireland, and that's where you actually register those interests that I referred to earlier. It's not a registry of titles, so ownership interests that are registered are not dispositive as to who actually owns the aircraft. Likewise, for creditors who win the race to the gate, there's notice that they might be a senior secured creditor.
So FITFR is a handy thing to remember. It means first in time, first in right. So whoever registers first has priority.
So the point here is that the Cape Town Convention is entirely dependent upon local law for its effectiveness. If the institutions in the contracting state, and that could be the judiciary or bureaucrats or others, misunderstand or misapply the Cape Town Convention, then its purpose can be completely frustrated. And as a practical consequence, what that means is Cape Town is not a shortcut to due diligence when you're looking at a transaction. You still have to look at the local laws in each contracting state and how Cape Town has been implemented to get a sense of how things might work out. It doesn't help that Cape Town, even after 12 years of being, 13 years now being effective, there's not a whole lot of history on it, and what history exists doesn't give creditors a lot of comfort.
Very good.
So we've done a nutshell of the Cape Town Convention. It's terrifically arcane. And if you're disinclined to reading upwards of 1,000 pages of official commentary and the practitioner's guide, you should give your lawyer a call.
That wasn't me doing the self-promotional thing, just want everybody to note that. Let's talk about some of you've heard the lawyers talk, let's listen to the real people talk about how Cape Town works from their point of view or what benefits they see in it. So the first point we're going to cover are the practical implications, So Marc and Sabrina are going to speak first about this. Everybody's going to contribute to the discussion, and we hope that you will contribute. But Marc and Sabrina, speak first to this.
So yeah, I mean, I think obviously we're dealing in multiple jurisdictions with movable assets. So from a financier's point of view, I think there's always kind of different approaches in terms of how the various legal systems in those jurisdictions would recognize security and a lender's title to that asset. And I suppose it gives quite a bit of uncertainty to a lot of the financiers in terms of what would happen in an event of default. So from an overall perspective, I think Cape Town really it is an international regime that really kind of increases the predictability and certainty for financiers in terms of the process that needs to be followed. I think it provides great benefit in providing clear priority for competing interests in assets. But really what it's most effective for is for the process that's followed in an event of default in terms of actually deregistering that aircraft and getting a lender security out. So I think kind of from a closing point of view in transactions, we found it quite beneficial. Often we're closing across different time zones in various jurisdictions, and often a local registry won't perhaps process your interest in that mortgage on the same day, or it takes a couple of days. So what benefit we get is obviously the Cape Town interest can be registered on closing immediately and filed, and it does give us as lenders that additional comfort.
Thanks. Sabrina?
I would echo that in that it gives you a general understanding of what a creditor or financier can come to expect in a different jurisdiction. It gives me personal greater comfort when we have case law and local enforcement by local jurisdictions in which to base our analysis on how much can we rely upon the Cape Town Treaty and how can we adequately protect our rights in various jurisdictions. I also think, and I'll probably speak to this later because it is my favorite part about the Cape Town Convention, is that all parties are agreeing to their priority in a secured interest format. So there aren't any surprises. A lot of times when you're filing in the US on various, within states in the UCC, you don't always need consent. You need contractual consent. But the way that the IR is set up is that you do have to be a registered user. You do have to consent to someone filing against you. So every party involved in a transaction has already agreed to the priority set forth on the filings. As a financier, we take a lot of comfort in that.
Thanks, Sabrina. Johan, you had some interesting perspectives about this, including the impact just on your documentation, your closing process.
Sure. As a financier, I'm pretty interested in the benefits of Cape Town, as well as the time spent on a transaction. And if I start with the latter, I mean, earlier days when Cape Town Convention came into play, we spent a lot of time doing all the filing and searches, etc., on our own. We didn't find the platform being very sophisticated and easy to deal with. So yeah, there was some time spent on each transaction with respect to Cape Town, and we didn't really know what the benefit was. So what we did then, actually, we appointed an administrator who was then dealing with all the registration aspects and all the other aspects and filings with respect to Cape Town Convention. This has made our life much easier because we don't really spend any time on Cape Town Convention on our transaction, other than maybe chasing a couple of CPs with respect to filings and the like. On the benefit side, I mean, I think Cape Town allows for filing IDERAs with the aircraft registry, which is great, and also international interests with the IR. These registrations provide a lot of self-help remedies, which, for example, in countries like Malta was not available before. So if you had to repossess an aircraft, you had to go to the local court, and you could spend years until you get your aircraft back. And now with Cape Town Convention and the IDERA, you can just arrest the plane or take possession over the plane quite easily. And I think it has been tested, actually.
Just to stop for 1 second, just one thing to keep in mind. We're all talking about collateral rights. That's really what the treaty and the aircraft protocol are about. It's about collateral rights. So, you know, they're all financing aircraft. They're hoping that the customer pays, but if the customer doesn't pay, they need their aircraft back. So the core principle here is the speed and the cost efficiencies of recovering their collateral. So part of it is that registration process we keep talking about, which establishes priority. So, you know, who can get the aircraft if they're competing lien holders. And then also the ability to not get stuck in the court system of some country. And that's, all these devices are really intended to facilitate recovery without getting stuck in the court system. And one of the devices is this IDERA, which just means that you get the right to deregister the aircraft. You, not the owner of the aircraft or the registered party, you, the holder of that IDERA, get the chance to deregister and export.
With respect to legal documentation, I mean, there are some tweaks necessary. I'm not being a lawyer, so, you know, probably a lawyer could place that better, but from a practical perspective, I mean, you certainly need to incorporate some language with respect to Cape Town. You need to do some modifications towards the definition section to introduce some definitions with respect to Cape Town Convention and the International Registry. Typical ones used are Cape Town Convention, International Registry, Transaction User Entity, etc., just to name a few of them.
Johan, let me skip to one really important point. Anybody here use Cape Town to repo an aircraft on the panel?
No, we have never used it, but I mean, talking about implications, we diligently do the registration process for all the financings because we feel it gives us additional comfort, but we actually have never tested it. And in the way we do a repossession anyway, that would be kind of the last step we do if everything has failed. We try everything, you know, just agreeable solution, compromise with the client so that he sells the aircraft, not us. So this is really the case where everything else has failed. And luckily we never were in that position where we required it.
Right, so that all the benefits of Cape Town are only useful to you if you make the registrations and you do the searches and you have the right closing process. Anybody in the audience have any experience repossessing an aircraft using Cape Town?
Just one word, maybe. I think we are also using Cape Town systematically, so we incorporate the Cape Town language in the documentation and so on. The idea for the people who are not familiar to that is an irrevocable deregistration and export authorization, which is signed in advance by the local civil aviation authorities. So normally, it's valid and enforceable whenever you need to export, to have the aircraft exported from the country where it is registered.
Thank you.
But we have never used it in a repossession scenario either.
But that's usually the question that is often asked when we talk about Cape Town. It's, okay, it sounds great, but has it really helped in practical circumstances? And we saw one hand, but we won't take any points right now, but that's the interesting response. Okay, so next point, how much faith do financiers put in the treaty? Michel and Marc, speak to it first.
I mean, as I mentioned before, we do it really on a systematic basis because it gives us additional comfort. But in fact, we have not done, or we're not doing additional registrations now that we would not do without the IR or so. So it helps us, we feel better, but this is, I mean, still the considerations remain the same if you would do a registry or not. But still, again, it's an add-on to our documentation, and I see it particularly helpful for two situations. One is where we have a lease financing, and the registration is an operator registry, so we don't see our name as owners there. So if we have the IR, of course, then we have an official place where everybody can see that we are the owner. So that gives us certainly additional comfort. And again, the idea is there are countries where, you know, repossession is really complicated. You have to go through the court system. Sometimes you don't really trust the court system. So there, of course, we would feel much more comfortable. We just could go and deregister. But again, we have never tested it. We're just hopeful it would be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it kind of gives us as financiers this warm and fuzzy feeling that if something had to go wrong, you'd be protected and everything would work out as intended. But I mean, if you look at kind of our jurisdiction, or where I focus in terms of Africa, that initial map, and the countries that have actually adopted it, there's not a lot. So in terms of us, does it preclude us doing deals outside of the countries that haven't signed Cape Town? Absolutely not. It does provide the additional comfort. And I think there are also then issues in terms of kind of an implementation point of view. So even South Africa, while it's been adopted, there are implementation issues from a local law perspective where it hasn't been fully adopted. So yeah, very helpful, very important, not an absolute deal breaker, but does give us additional comfort.
The last note was actually mine. In the States, most business aircraft are financed by banks that look at these as credit transactions. They care quite a bit about the collateral, but they care quite a bit more about the credit. I mean, Sabrina's company is extraordinary, and so is Stonebriar, and there are a few other financing providers that have a bit more focus on the asset. But U.S. lenders get nervous doing things that are international. Their credit officers in particular, if they're based in the States, so they consider, when they do a cross-border deal, they consider Cape Town to be very important. Biggest wins from a financier's perspective, Marie-Laure and Sabrina, speak to it first.
I think the biggest win is probably to have an international register which is transparent and creates obligation for the contracting states. I think the commitment a country makes when they sign such an international treaty is really effective, and even if we have to go back to the local courts to enforce some of the rights under the convention, I think there is no reason to be pessimistic and to assume that the law is not going to be applied. I don't think any country would jeopardize its reputation on the international stage because they refuse to export an aircraft that is supposed to be repossessed. So, and I think this is a very generous statement, but I think this is very important in an international environment. And in terms of biggest wins for the financiers, I think, as we mentioned, I mean, it creates, Cape Town is an interesting alternative when you want to register a mortgage. It allows to register it in a flexible manner at the international level when it's too complex to do it locally. In some countries, you may have some stamp duties or taxes, which makes the local registration expensive. In some countries, registering a mortgage is very demanding. You need to disclose the name of the beneficial owner, which for business jet is not possible. In some countries also it takes time. This is probably the most frequent scenario. You may have countries where it takes weeks or even months to get the mortgage properly registered. And when you finance an aircraft, you need to have the securities in place at the moment you make the money available. So it's good to have the mortgage registered internationally by the time you get it registered locally. When you have also a sale and purchase transaction, sometimes you have a gap between the moment you deregister the aircraft and the moment you re-register the aircraft in the new country, and it may be easier to have your security registered on Cape Town because locally there are some delays. So I think this is an interesting alternative, and it is. I mean, we are using it as much as we can. And in a default scenario, as we mentioned, I mean, there is this IDIRA, which is a new tool created by the convention. So again, I think when the IDIRA is signed by the local civil aviation authorities, there is no reason to assume that it's not going to be enforceable if we need it. So I think it's good to have it. It's good to what it worth. It's not magic, but it's good to have it.
Thanks. Sabrina?
I think that in the extreme circumstance, when you're looking at default remedies, it gives a financier a great deal of comfort to understand how it is that they can reach their collateral in a worst case scenario. But what I do want to underline here is that that is a worst case scenario, and there's other really great practical effects to Cape Town Convention. And speaking as an in-house attorney, where I live with an account for the entire term that it's with our company, and an aircraft may experience a change in registration, or it may have a transfer and assumption, or a company may have gone through a merger and acquisition. I have the comfort that our international registrations are in place. We'll move with the collateral over the life of the term. A lot of us sit up here because Cape Town did give us a lot of continuity with regard to a defaulting asset. The vast majority of assets are not defaulting, so there are other really practical commercial impacts of this treaty.
And I think if we had an ECA or manufacturer representative on the panel, they would say that they're particularly fond of it because it's intended to facilitate, like I was saying before, the sale out of your country of exported assets, and so it is facilitative that way. Okay, let's go to we talked about biggest wins actually. Have the original intentions been met? Clay, speak to this first.
Ask me your question again.
Sure. Have the original intentions of the treaty and protocol been met? Right. So the original intentions that we have the global playing field.
Part of the thing about the international registry was that it was sold to all of us that it was going to facilitate business across the world. We were explained to that, it was going to be something that was going to happen that was going to make a big difference. And as my mom told me, don't ever say anything bad about somebody because it'll come back and haunt you. But quite frankly, it's not done what I was told it was going to do. No one has shown me, somebody raised their hand that said they used it to do a repossession out there. I want whatever it is you have because I begged from the IR, from the aircraft working group, and everyone else to show me that this actually will work, that someone can repossess an asset. The U.S. market was attacked basically by using the GA aircraft that no one knew would get thrown onto the IR, and we had to take that process and make it work for small aircraft owners. I owned a 421 at the time that this came out. I had a very small loan with the bank, and I had to get it registered on the IR. The IR didn't know how to put Clay Healey down as the owner of the plane. They still don't know how to separate an engine from a helicopter. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at and say, is the IR doing what it said it was going to do, and is it facilitating business? Is that not what it's about? It's what I was told it was about. Is it making it easier for you as lenders to lend into different marketplaces? Does it bring the interest rate down that we were told it was going to do? Does it actually help you do business? Kind of quiet in here right now, isn't it?
Not yet, not yet.
The answer to that question is, someone show me how this helps us instead of causing us the burdens and the cost of what it takes. AIC spends between $40 and $50, $60, $70, $80,000 a month with the International Registry on behalf of our clients. Am I doing something good for them?
So
it's not my product, it's someone else's. They need to come and help us sell that product into the marketplace. So the question is, did it do what it was said it was going to do? I don't know. It's 12 years, 13 now. Is it helping you all as lenders? Is it helping you as brokers? Is it helping you anywhere facilitate more aircraft transactions? Please, I'll be out there all day. Someone come help me know that I'm doing something right for my clients.
Clay,
I don't know that
Clay.
that's anything that's up there because I couldn't really hear your
No.
question. So that's all I need to say, and I'm done.
All right. That's why we have Clay on this panel, right? There you go. Among other things. So just a point of perspective about that. So I was mentioning before who were the drivers behind the convention and the protocol. You didn't hear general aviation or business aviation or the helicopter industry. You know, as I understand it, they came up with this set of good principles, you know, the registry and the enforcement rights, again, to support ECAs and to support manufacturers. But when they created this registry from scratch, they built in Dublin, and they, you know, decided that it would have all this complicated software, it would be available 24/7, and then they looked at the revenue that would be generated by the registrations if it was just, you know, essentially air carriers, aircraft, and they said, whoa, we won't be able to pay for the registry. So then they moved the levels downward towards the level of GA and business aviation and helicopter use. So all of a sudden, this became imposed on our part of the market without much thought towards the implications to us. And, you know, the US has a big GA and business aircraft market. So if you're just doing a deal, US bank, you know, with a US customer, all of a sudden you have to deal with all of the international registry issues. As you could tell from, you know, Clay's perspective, that's a problem. That's a problem. It's not, it's, you know, it was inclusive only because they wanted our money. But on the other hand, it's a mobile asset. It ends up other places. And so there's certainly the notion that it is very useful, especially because if an aircraft isn't registered at the FAA, the notion of who owns that aircraft is less certain. With the registry, you have more certainty about the chain of ownership with an airframe and with engines. So to me, I think that's beneficial. Another sign of a big win for some people is when we showed that map, how many countries were blue, how many signatories there were. So for there to be international acceptance of a law like that is pretty impressive. And then Clay was talking about how many registrations you do a month. They just registered the millionth. The IR had their millionth registration.
How many registrations do we do a month on the IR?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Big number.
Probably 400 or 500.
All right, but and there's a fee paid
every month.
But there you go.
I'm probably low on that.
But okay, so limitations. Your thoughts, Marie-Laure?
I think the question was, have the original intention been met? Actually, I don't know what were the original intentions, so I don't have the answer. But I assume it is. If the original intention was to reduce legal uncertainty and facilitate aircraft transactions, I think the answer is probably yes. Not only for aircraft, but also for, not only for private aviation, but also for commercial aviation and helicopters and engines. We have an international convention that has been ratified by almost 80 states, so it makes it well recognized worldwide. There is an international registry which is transparent, flexible, available 24 hours a day. It didn't exist before, so I think, yes, it works. And from a legal perspective, this is a very standardized, unique, simple manner to register, relatively simple manner to register interest in a movable asset. So I think from an academic and technical and legal perspective, it works. Now, I don't think there was any, as you mentioned, I don't think there was any specific initial intention to help financing business jets. So the answer is not perfect. And from this perspective, that was not the intention. I think this is not the result. We cannot register the entire security package under Cape Town. We still do deals in jurisdiction and in countries which have not ratified Cape Town. If tomorrow we have an aircraft to finance in France, registered in France, owned by a French SPC, we are relatively comfortable with the French system and the French courts, so we will do it even if France has not ratified Cape Town. So we cannot register anything internationally, but I don't think this is a deal breaker. And as, I don't know, somebody mentioned also, each transaction for business jet financing is so unique, so specific, so, with different jurisdictions that we never know in advance how we can repossess an aircraft and how it's going to be managed and to be possible. So we don't know in advance if Cape Town will be useful or if we are going to rely on other components of our security package. So I think it's good for what it is worth. It's another layer of comfort, but it's not perfect. And for sure, I don't know if it was part of the original intention, but it doesn't increase our security in such a way that we are going to reduce the pricing.
Thank you. Michel, you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that my view on this is not as negative. It might not be that it was a huge step forward and making much more business possible, but I certainly like it as a bank. It gives me additional comfort, and frankly, the additional effort we have to do such registrations is not really big compared to what we do anyway. Transactions that we do tend to be quite complicated, so it's just an additional step. So the downsides are much less than the upsides. And if it hurts, if it doesn't help, it certainly doesn't hurt.
So if I asked each of you, love the Cape Town Convention and Protocol, tolerate the protocol and convention, hate the convention and protocol. So go in order this way. Love, tolerate, hate. Those are your only three choices.
Tolerate.
I think we love it, not too much, but we love it.
Tolerate.
I'm going to irritate you and say that I like it.
Okay. That wasn't one of the choices, but it's fine.
Yeah, I'll go with that as well.
Ordering off the menu. That's what I call that.
Between tolerate and hate.
Anybody want to guess what Clay's answer is going to be right before you?
I don't need to answer that question. You all figured that one out. So I think tolerate would be what I suggest. And our time has run out. So
there was some polling questions. There's an actual question, human being question. We can go with that too.
Clay, what's your solution? And I think they make good wines in Oklahoma as well.
no, they don't make good wine in Oklahoma.
Clay, repeat his question because I'm not sure everybody heard it.
I'm sorry?
Please repeat the question.
The question was, what's the solution? And, oh man. If you gave it to me and I could make that decision, I would either do one of two things. I'd kill the treaty for the U.S. The rest of the world can keep it. I think it's fine for everybody that needs to have an international transaction. But somebody buying and selling a plane from Oklahoma to Kansas doesn't need to be registering something in Dublin that if it gets messed up, I have to pay an attorney to go to Dublin to fight that. Okay, so that would be it, kill it. Second option would be, if they were smart enough, they might come back in and say, ooh, that might really hurt. We might not want to do that. Maybe just increase the size of the aircraft to what it should have been to begin with and put it into the commercial world and let that commercial world deal with those registrations. I think that's fair. I don't think that's unfair. I think that way the IR gets to stay around and do the international things that it said it was going to do. So I apologize that I only have two answers for you, but those would be the two I chose.
And if we killed the treaty, we would make Mexico pay for all the cost of that. So it would be fine. It's all good. All right, so last question. Patriots or Rams? Patriots. How many people know what I'm talking about? All right. Patriots. I hate them, so to me it's any other team. But the Rams, there we go. All right, there we go. Thank you very much.